On this day, Tisha B'Av, to mourn for the tragedies that befell the Jewish people across Jewish history, we stop everything to remember those tragedies, to study them, and to always learn. Remarkably, today marks, and I'm not sure if Rabbi Goldschmidt was aware of that, nearly to the day, the meeting with Rabbi Goldschmidt when he brought envelopes with folders that held photographs to the Blavatnik Archive. It was on July 21st, 2023. Rabbi Goldschmidt shared these photographs that were donated by an esteemed and beloved member of the Altneu Synagogue congregation, Irina Kokush, who was dedicated to preserving the history. Folders were labeled as Liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army, but unfortunately, there was absolutely no other information. But Rabbi Goldschmidt, together with Avital, they make things happen. And together we embarked on this path to investigate the photos and to learn. We work with scholars because they are experts, because they question, because they cross-reference exhaustively. First, Brandon Schechter, the archives historian, material culture historian, and World War II scholar, introduced the context of the war from the Soviet side. Then we've been fortunate to work with Dr. Tcherneva, our keynote speaker today, who will be introduced more at length in a little bit, who specializes in Soviet documentary film and photography, to actually tell us what these photographs mean and what they are and what they show. 3 years later, and I'm gonna hopefully show you, the Altneu congregation is the first to know the collection is now live on our website. And I wanted to show you, there it is. It is free access to all. And in this program, the first to learn, you're the first to learn more about what these valuable primary sources mean. That were preserved by Irina Kokush and shared with us by this incredible shul and synagogue. I would like to ask Brandon Schechter, I mentioned before, to introduce Dr. Irina Tcherneva.
Thank you. On the eve of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, I had the solemn privilege of offering some context, the context that I was capable of giving on this collection. Some of you may remember that evening. And at that time, we promised that we would find someone who knows much, who can go much more in depth, who is, capable of telling a much more nuanced story and a much more detailed story of these photographs. And today it is my honor to introduce one of the foremost experts on the visual history of the Shoah and the Second World War. Irina Porte Tcherneva, PhD, is a senior researcher at the French National Center for Scientific Research. Her research focuses on the analysis of documentary image for social sciences, the socio-economic history of documentary cinema, and the role of visual documents during the Second World War and post-war trials. She has participated in several international research projects, including the Horizon 2020 project, Visual History of the Holocaust, based in Austria, World War II Crimes on Trial 1943 to 1991, based in France, Images of Justice, the Nazis and Collaborators on Trial in Liberated Europe, based in France, and Soviet Cinema at War 1939 to 1945, also based in France. Her recent publications in a variety of languages include documenting Nazi crimes through Soviet film, Photographier les violences extrêmes, seeking accountability for Nazi and war crimes in East and Central Europe, Surviving the War, the Soviet film industry in 1939 to 1949, and Cinema Goes to War, Screens and Propaganda in the USSR. I turn things over to Irina, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
I permit myself to put my sound. Thank you very much, dear madams and sirs. I'm really delighted to have a possibility to converse with you today, even if it is remotely. And I would like to express my warmest thanks to Julie Czerwinski and Brandon Schechter for the trust we have built whilst working together around these photographs, and for inviting me to contribute here. It's an honor for me. So as Julie Czerwinski told, when Julie and Brandon first approached me, all we knew was that these 126 photographs had been taken at Auschwitz and at the back of some prints bore the initials CSML, which stands for the Central Forensic Laboratory of the Red Army. So I will share my screen because I prepared a contribution, a small diapo up. Upon consulting, please make me a sign if you see my PowerPoint. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So upon consulting them, I recognized some of the Soviet investigators of Nazi crimes, but also certain scenes that as I had worked on the unedited documentary footage shot by Soviet cameramen following the liberation of the Auschwitz camps. And this work had been conducted, as Brandon clarified, during the research project Visual History of the Holocaust. So it was therefore necessary to investigate in depth for whom these photographs had been taken and under what circumstances. So I would like to set out the overall context straight away. This collection was not created to be displayed to the general public. That was not its primary purpose, even though some of the photographs later found their way into the media. These photographs were taken for use by judicial, medical, military, and police representatives of the Soviet state. And as far as these images were not intended to be shown to the public, we can qualify them as useful imagery, images that owe their existence to scrutiny by professional experts. I have devoted several papers to the use of visual material, both as evidence and as a tool for knowledge within various Soviet institutions. First of all, the Extraordinary State Commission, which investigated into the Nazi crimes and which had been established in 1942, then the NKVD, the political police, and subsequently the KGB. So during the Second World War, in the Soviet Union, the use of visual material by various state bodies became routinized. And what is interesting about this type of visual documents is that it challenges a reified conception of the image as propaganda created under the direct top-down control of the party. Useful imagery allows us to understand the flow of information between various professional bodies and institutions without the Soviet general public being aware of it. And in particular, within this interinstitutional space, an explicit knowledge of the Holocaust existed in the Soviet Union, despite the waves of state anti-Semitism both in the 40s and in the 60s. Whilst for the general public, in most cases, the specific nature of the anti-Jewish racial crime was diluted within the generalized designation of Soviet civilian victims. So, which professional bodies required these photographs of Auschwitz? So we can identify Nikolai Ivanovich Gerasimov, a representative of the Central Forensic Lab of the Red Army, which had been established in 1943. Gerasimov provided assistance to the medical officers of the First Ukrainian Front, specifically the 16th Army, during the exploration of the Auschwitz camp. The Polish researcher Jacek Lahendro published a book, Auschwitz po wyzwoleniu, Auschwitz at the moment of liberation. He published it in 2015. And in this book, some of the photos identified are common to this collection, and these photos are held in Auschwitz Memorial. So during the 90s, as I've understood, thanks to our correspondence, Auschwitz Memorial acquired 65 copies of the photographs, some of which are identical to those in the Kokush collection. So these photographs under consideration are contained within an album known as Brezhin album, which is very probably kept in the Military Medical Academy of Defense in St. Petersburg, with the famous camera used by the Sonderkommando to photograph the killing of Jews, and along with the metal canister in which they had buried the fabricated, testimony from the heart of the Holocaust, known as scrolls beneath the ashes. So the album derives its appellation from that of Gerasimov colleague Fedorovich Brezhin, and you can see him in this photo near the window. Brezhin was born in 1900 and deceased in 1977, and he was graduate of the Kirov Military Medical Academy. Following the establishment of the Army's forensic service, he was designated as an expert of the First Ukrainian Front, and subsequently he took part in the Nuremberg trials. In the same time, during this expertise, it was possible to establish that the Brezhin album is itself a compilation of various types of photos, created for the Extraordinary State Commission and during its work, for the Red Army. And this collection does not comprise only scientific or expert photographs. Various photographers participated to this work. Some of them were unknown, and they worked permanently for the Central Forensic Lab, but some of them were famous war reporters, as the Soviet Ukrainian photographer Vladimir Yudin. And indeed, I found the same cliché, some of them, in the documents of the CGK, so in the textual archives, in the documents of the Extraordinary State Commission, and in the archival fund of Yudin in Ukrainian state archives. So the nature of the cliché varies. Some of them are professionally oriented, but others reflect organized events. So this album takes the form of a hybrid visual object. Some words about the CGK. So CGK, the Extraordinary State Commission, had begun its work in 1942 with a view to gather evidence for a future international tribunal. And later, towards the end of the 43, various governing bodies of the Soviet state decided to preserve a number of visual records for posterity, and to some extent to fashion them for the future chronicles, historical chronicles, even though these images didn't serve immediate practical purpose. Consequently, several layers of documentation, several perceptions of the visual, and various visions of the future are intertwined within these images. And these images, a part of them, had been also exposed during the Nuremberg trial. And then I also found a copy of the album within the Ukrainian party archives. The album, which had been created for the Nuremberg trials. So to some extent, these photographers were used for several purposes: professional, judicial, and afterwards political. So the arrangement of the images does not necessarily reflect the chronological sequence in which the camp was discovered. And one of my aims was to restitute the original temporality. And so that the precise geographical location and the date of events depicted in the photographs could be ascertained. However, it is noteworthy that some of the photographs, only one or two of them, do not correspond to any known architectural elements at Birkenau. And therefore, I clarified it in the description of the cliché that the photographers had been taken in nearby locations and had been incorporated into the collection. I would like now to say some words about my approach. So when I work on the contextualization of the images, I adopt a microhistorical approach. And in particular, I gather information about the circumstances in which the images had been captured and research all the individuals acting in front and behind the camera. Thus, in order to work on these particular photographs, I immersed myself into 30 volumes of archives compiled by the investigators of the State Commission. And here I just reproduce some pages of the inventory of these archives. These documents allow to follow day by day how the offices questioned survivors, collected testimonies, how the technician and chemists carried out forensic analysis of everything they found at the sites, and how the doctors examined the bodies, the human remains, and also the suffering survivors. And doing this, I mentally mapped out the exhumation sites, the routes taken by the commission members, as well as the relationship that they had forged with the Auschwitz doctors, with those of Sonderkommandos who managed to stay alive and were exceptional witnesses. The written records are very precise regarding the mutilation inflicted on the victims, the illness suffered, I will find this, the illness suffered by those who were liberated, and the composition of the soil in which human remains were found. These photographs, for example, the medical photographs, had been included in the written files alongside the medical reports to better illustrate what was described verbally. The second trait of the knowledge is a comparison of this archive, the written archive, the photographic archive, and the documentary footage. These are, in fact, 3 layers of information on the same situations, and I observed that photographers and cameramen were working together in the same space and time. For instance, here you have one cliché from our collection, and on the left side of the screen, you have the footage of the exhumation of the gas chambers and crematoria. So the Soviets learned that the gas chambers had been exploded by the Nazi before their retreat. Informed by the survivors, the Soviet technicians conducted excavations, which had been filmed and thoroughly photographed. Or, for instance, here we have also on the left side of the screen, we have one of the cliché of the doctors, which had been prisoners. And on the right side of the screen, you have the same situation, which had been filmed. So these exchange with doctors detained by the Nazi were extremely precious for the Soviets. Here we see, for instance, 4 of them. Henri Limousin, a pathologist, professor of the University of Clermont-Ferrand. His proficiency in Russian proved instrumental in facilitating interaction with the Commission. Bertolt Epstein, a pediatrician and university professor. He worked in Prague and later in Oslo, and he fled to Norway in March 1940. He was apprehended in Oslo with his wife. His wife was immediately sent to a gas chamber, and he was subsequently transferred to the gypsy camp where Mengele conducted experiments on children. Or Geza Mansfeld, you see him here on the photos and in the footage. He was a pharmacologist who was born in the end of the 19th century in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Mansfeld was nominated for a Nobel Prize on 2 occasions in the beginning of the 20th century. And in the 30s, he was Dean of the Faculty of Medicine in Pécs. And finally, Bruno Sigismund, Zygmunt, a psychiatrist born in Prague, working in Vienna prior to attaining Czech citizenship. So these doctors were extremely valuable and provided a very valuable testimony to the CGK and engaged in medical research conducted by Soviet experts. But also, there are some other images that can be cross-referenced. For example, the Talits. The photography of Talits, clear evidence of the Jewish identity of the overwhelming majority of the victims, had been taken and figured in the Nuremberg trial. And Here, I reproduce a small excerpt of film in the toilets. And both photo and this excerpt of footage have not been made public. Sometimes the footage reveals situations that photographs omit. For example, you can observe in the collection a majority of quite consequent number of photographs representing a Catholic funeral ceremony. But in the same time, there were other religious ceremonies led by survivors. And here I can reproduce you an excerpt of this. And on the right side of the screen, you can read a description of this small excerpt of the footage by the cameraman who filmed it. So the fact that the national Catholic funerals were organized, and they were organized not only in Oswiecim, but also in other cities, and not only in Poland, but also in the liberated territories of the Soviet Union. The fact of these funerals naturally served to in form of de-Judaification of the victims, and ultimately served to render the racial motives behind the violence invisible. So a fourth layer of information that I mobilized in order to inform the cliché consists of the filming reports. We can also call them caption sheets. And these filming reports had been written by the Soviet cameraman and sent with the film reels to Moscow. In these reports, they described what concretely they had filmed. And these documents are extremely valuable because the footage as such does not provide personal information. So I reproduced some of them. And these documents are particularly fascinating, these handwritten documents directly sent from the Auschwitz. So I searched for information about the people identified thanks to these documents in the highly detailed CGK files. And it is during such analysis that text and context become inextricably intertwined, and the image becomes a genuine historical document. To my knowledge, there are no equivalent reports for the photographs taken, but the CGK registers serve this purpose in some respects, and the filming reports depict some of the same scenes because, as I said, cameramen and photographers worked in parallel. So here we have also another archival document. It's a caption sheet, and in particular we can see in the episode number 30 that the Soviet investigators filmed and took images of the gas chambers. A fifth layer of information was provided by the memoirs of Auschwitz survivors. For example, this is how my colleague Tal Brüttmann was able to shed light on the emotional experience of the children while they were prepared for image taking. In our collection, you can also see cliché of these children. All of them had not been sent directly to the gas chambers because they had endured medical experience conducted by the Nazi. And so Tal Brüttmann uncovered the perception of the children who posed for the Soviet cameras. Photographers and cameramen asked them to put on prisoners' uniforms, which they did not normally wear, and to march back and forth in front of the cameras between two rows of barbed wire, where prisoners would normally never have passed. It is crucial to understand the actions of such an elaboration of the visual media and the impact of this elaboration on those who have just emerged from the hell of the Nazi extermination camp. Such images constitute an archival document. They do not constitute a falsification, as all the participants are real and have genuinely endured these torments. However, these participants were placed in specific situations in order to be photographed. Whereas a major part of the documents are authentic, in contrast, there is a set of photographs and raw footage, which you can see here, that was created retrospectively, yet claimed to show the very moment of liberation. The practice of staging was officially and formally condemned and prohibited in the USSR. And there were several cameramen that were heavily criticized for doing this. However, as we were able to demonstrate during an exhibition in Mémorial de la Shoah in Paris, this scene had been organized as the local army commander was dissatisfied that the very moment of arrival at Auschwitz had not been captured on visual. And what he requested was a part of a campaign about his regiment. It's a kind of institutional promotion, so which is not the same as a propaganda managed and directly from the Communist Party. So you see this small scale social history of the image that I try to practice comprises two perspectives: a reflection on the use of the images by the institutions concerned, and an examination of a situation where the event is recorded, given that the camera and the person holding it exert an impact on reality. I try to pay close attention to the power relations that emerge at that moment, that the visual medium both shapes and records. And this permits to visualize the space of interactions before and behind the camera. And the Kokush collection was a magnificent possibility to analyze this. There was also obviously the issue of identifying specific individuals who had until then remained more or less anonymous. So many of Soviet military and officials, and you will find online the results of this research, but also prisoners. For instance, this example. In this photograph, the caption of this photograph accompanied it at the Nuremberg trials was "the French prisoners upon liberation." That was all. So the prisoners are posing at the entrance to the camp and appear to have been forced to wear prison's uniforms at the photographer's request. The photo was likely taken in March because it is flooded with sunlight. And discussing with my colleague Tal Brutman, who identified at the same time another photo taken in Auschwitz for his research project for Mémorial de la Shoah. So after this discussion, I searched for the portraits that accompanied the interrogations by the Chegikam and compared face by face with those who are depicted here. So several persons were identified, and you have online and here on this PowerPoint their names. As far as I'm just a human being with a human brain, not IA entity. I was not capable to identify all of them, but it will be conducted in the future. Another history, also very interesting history, is this photo. This person was completely known. He introduced himself to the Soviet military as Frenchman Maurice Barenfer. And I conducted a search in Altneu-Kokush archives using the number tattooed on his forearm. And this archive revealed that he was a Russian Jew named Isaac Barannikov, who had immigrated to France, who had been naturalized French citizen, and was subsequently arrested during the Nazi occupation of France. And it is interesting that he didn't want to reveal his origins to the Soviet officials. He presented himself as Maurice Barenfer. So in conclusion, my aim in examining this fascinating collection of photographs was to analyze, to identify the specific situations, locations, and individuals depicted, and to try to understand what type of relationship they had with the Soviet members of the Commission at that precise moment. And when we cross-reference the information provided by these photographs with the history of their creation, it offers a glimpse into a little-known aspect of the use of visual records with the Red Army and within various institutions involved in documenting Nazi crimes. So by close reading of archives, by maintaining a microscale approach, by applying genetic tool to the visual document, we can better locate the propagandistic impulse on the one hand, and on the other hand, the usage of concrete data related to the Holocaust. And this helps to uncover documentary facts about the Holocaust, but because for far too long, the entire body of Soviet documentation has been dismissed as the product of political falsification orchestrated by the Communist Party. But today, the recent scholarship in the Holocaust and genocide studies permits to shift the focus from the propagandistic content to the very construction of the political persuasion or of a knowledge through the image. Thus, this collection forms a part of several historical movements of the 20th century. The history of the discovery of the Holocaust and the initial steps taken following the liberation, the history of Soviet state and the social history of Soviet institutions, and the history of the usage of images as evidence, which is quite an important topic even today. So I thank you very cordially for your attention, particularly as the listening conditions on Zoom are not ideal. And I will be really delighted to answer any questions you may have.
That was fascinating. As much as we've been working together, Dr. Tcherneva, to hear you talk about it is still, I keep learning so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're happy if anybody does have a question. If not, I have a quick one, but yeah, just unmute yourself if I don't see you. Okay,
I have a question.
please.
What do you know about the provenance of the photos and how they got out of the Soviet Union?
So yes, actually, my study started from the collection itself when the photos were already outside of Russia. And through the correspondence and exchange with the Auschwitz Memorial, I understood that the Auschwitz Memorial acquired a part of the copies of this album. And the data about the original source had been preserved in the Auschwitz Memorial. And so I'm very grateful to the colleagues from this memorial about it, because it was possible then to understand what part had been taken out when I confronted several versions of this album, actually. As far as the collection, the Kokush collection is concerned, these are the owners of the collection who provided us with the information that the cliché had been acquired recently. And if I understand correctly, they had been bought to one of the descendants of the photographer. And so the very original source is normally, if I understood correctly this archival history, is in St. Petersburg Military Academy.
And that's yeah, that's the most information that we also have. And just to be very clear, the collection is loan with us, with the understanding that we are making it accessible and going through this process together, to shed some light on it. So that's exactly, just confirming that's what we know. Any other questions? I have a question, if it's okay, Dr. Tcherneva. The photographs, especially with the witnesses and the prisoners that are, because they are taking, starting in February through this commission, through their work, did these prisoners remain in Auschwitz after the liberation? Sort of, what, so I guess, being not the scholar, my imagination is the camp was liberated and people sort of leave, but obviously that is in these cases sort of not what it's showing. So they continued living there, sort of how, if you could speak about the prisoners remaining there or the witnesses.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So when the Soviet army liberated the Auschwitz camps, so maybe just a small introduction about what they knew about the camp. Actually, the NKVD possessed some information about what happened in the extermination camps since 1943. And this information was confirmed when the Soviet army started the liberation of the Polish territories, and so observed other camps. But some historical documents show that the Soviet military men who liberated the Auschwitz did not possess this information. Actually, it was kept in Moscow. It had been communicated to the party and political authorities, but not to this specific army which liberated. So when they came on 27th of February, and they started to take images practically the day after, on the 28th of February. And so at this moment, there were in all these camps, which form the archipelago Auschwitz, there were for about 6,000 detainees who were still there. And many of them were dying, many of them were suffering from diseases. So in the photo collection, we see some photographs on evacuation of people. So there are some clichés which show the departure of people. The same, we can observe it in the footage. Several books had been published by the researchers of the Auschwitz Memorial about the medical assistance and help provided, so within the Red Cross, etc. So many of the prisoners liberated were not capable of leaving the camp in the very first days, in the very first weeks. And actually, there were various sessions of taking the photographs in the mid-February, in the end of January 1st, then in mid-February, and then even in March. And actually, what I can see also in the Czechika files is that some witnesses, mostly identified as crucial witnesses by the Soviets, they are interrogated several times and they stay in the camp. And obviously, the Sonderkommando, the doctors I was speaking about, were extremely valuable for the Soviets because they provided very precise knowledge on medicine, on the torture inflicted to the prisoners, on the functioning of the gas chambers. Actually, these were also Sonderkommandos who indicated to the Soviets the concrete place where the written testimony by this Sonderkommando had been put in, and all this documentation. So I think that to answer very briefly your question, like in a conclusive way, there were a lot of people who left the camp. Another part of detainees who needed obviously medical assistance and who stayed, but also several detainees and prisoners who continued and who assisted the Soviet officials in the investigation.
Fascinating. Thank you. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, the collection is now live on our site. I'll be happy to share the link as well, and you can actually see the specific photographs. Each photograph, we worked together for the past quite a while now, putting all of that information so you can read about each photograph, thanks to Dr. Tcherneva's work. And so, yeah, I suppose if there's no other questions, thank you so much for joining us. We're very grateful to be able to study this, to share it with you, and it is so appropriate on this day and with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention.